friends, I had on the last occasion spoken on different types of mortgages and also the rights of the mortgagee, comprising of 67, 68, and 69 of the Transfer of Property Act. The rights of the mortgagee against the mortgagor. I had highlighted that each type of mortgagee has a different right vis-a-vis the mortgagor. Having dealt with that part of the provision, so I literally dealt with section 58, 67, 68, and 69. Today I propose to deal with the mortgagor's right of redemption and certain other topics such as marshalling, contribution, subrogation, right of who can redeem the mortgage, and charge. So these are the topics which I will deal with. With this, substantially the whole part of mortgages would get over. Of course, there are some sections which I am not dealing with and which I would not touch also, but they are there. So if anybody has to look into it, will have to look into those sections. With this background, I'll start my second part of my lecture. See, before I go to this slide, and last time I was informed by some people who are hearing me that I was a little too fast. So I may try to be a slightly slower than what I was last time. In England, what was really known was only common law. That is, what was agreed between the parties would be enforced by the courts of common law, which is now King's Bench Division in England. Many times, certain rights were such which the courts would say, yes, you may have a right, but you are not a party to the contract and therefore we cannot enforce that right. One of the most common such rights was the right of a beneficiary in a trust. The contract is always between the donor and the trustee. And there is no contract between the donor and the beneficiary or the trustee and the beneficiary. So if the trustees don't distribute anything to the beneficiary, beneficiaries had no remedy. They had to approach the king, and king would give them relief. This king found that the burden was very heavy, so he appointed the chancellor and thereafter the chancery division, which became the equity courts. Therefore, in England, common law in England recognized contractual rights. So if a contract provided that a person who has taken loan is not entitled to redeem his mortgage after a period of 3 years, he loses his right in property in spite of being able to repay the loan. Because he had no right. Contract said that you have to pay within 3 years. If you don't pay in 3 years, you cannot redeem the property at all. So he would lose the right to property. In that background, it became very unfair. Therefore, thus, these affected borrowers approached the court of chancery or a court of equity. And what happened in the court of equity is seen in the second slide. As early as 1681, the equity of redemption was recognized. The court of equity, wherein the court observed, once a mortgage, always a mortgage. Now, what does this mean? Once a mortgage, always a mortgage. That means that a mortgage doesn't get converted to a sale. It remains only a mortgage. And the mortgagor can at any time, even after the period of 3 years are over, come forward and redeem the mortgage. The meaning of the aforesaid phrase is that a mortgagor cannot be deprived of his right to redeem the mortgage by paying the money to the mortgagee on the basis of any condition imposed in the mortgage document. Another judgment, the observations are very nice and therefore I would like to read them. Just 1 minute. The words are, the court is a court of conscience. An equity court was always a court of conscience. Is very jealous of persons taking securities for a loan and converting such securities into purchases. And therefore, I take it to be an established rule that a mortgagee can never provide at the time of making the loan for any event or condition on which the equity of redemption shall be discharged and the conveyance absolute. And there is great reason and justice in this rule. For necessitous men are not truly speaking free men. People who need money, who have to borrow money, are not free men. They will agree to any term which is provided. Necessitous men are not truly speaking free men, but to answer a present exigency, will submit to any terms that the crafty may impose upon them. The famous play of Shakespeare, Shylock in Merchant of Venice, had put a term, a pound of flesh, if you do not pay by a particular day. So any term can be put by a mortgagee who is advancing the loan. This was followed in England by the House of Lords in Noakes versus Rice, where Lord Derby explained the phrase once a mortgage, always a mortgage, in the following words. Once a mortgage, always a mortgage, and nothing but a mortgage. The meaning of that is that mortgagee shall not make any stipulation which will prevent a mortgagor who has paid principal, interest and cost from getting back his mortgage property in the condition in which he parted with. Now this is in England called the equity of redemption. What is recognized in England as an equity of redemption. Next slide. Equitable right or equity of redemption is recognized in India as a statutory right of redemption, available in all kinds of mortgage, and the period of limitation for enforcing such right is 30 years, not 3 years or 12 years. The Limitation Act provides a period of 30 years for redeeming the mortgage. So even after the due date, if a mortgagee is unable to pay, mortgagor is unable to pay the money, the mortgage, his right to pay will continue for a period of 30 years more, and he can file a suit for redemption within a period of 30 years. But it is important to note one fact, that the mortgagor's right of redemption and the mortgagee's right of foreclosure are coextensive. So while mortgagor can redeem within a period of 30 years, mortgagee can also foreclose within a period of 30 years. And moreover, this right will survive only till actually foreclosed by a decree and enforcement of a decree, or by a decree of sale and the property is actually sold. This right is provided in section 60 of the Transfer of Property Act. I will first read the section for the benefit of everyone and for my benefit also. At any time after the principal money has become due. This first clause of the section is very vital, and I will deal with it separately. The mortgagor has a right on payment or tender. So either it should be payment or offer to pay at proper time and place of the mortgage money. And mortgage money, as defined under the Act, includes both the principal amount and the interest. To require the mortgagee, what is the requirement? To require the mortgagee to deliver to the mortgagor the mortgage deed and all documents relating to the mortgage property, which are in possession or power of the mortgagee. This would happen in a simple mortgage as well as mortgage by deposit of title deeds. B, when the mortgagee is in possession of the mortgage property, to deliver possession thereof to the mortgagor. to deliver the possession to the mortgagor. This would apply to a usufructuary mortgagee. And 3, at the cost of the mortgagor, either to retransfer the mortgage property to him or to such third person as he may direct or to execute, where the mortgage has been effected by a registered instrument, and to have a registered acknowledgement in writing that any right in derogation of his interest transferred to the mortgagee has been extinguished. This will apply to a mortgage by conditional sale and perhaps even in an English mortgage. So really speaking, this is a single right conferred on the mortgagor, and by this right, all types of mortgages can be redeemed on payment of money. Now this second proviso is also important, has not been extinguished by act of parties or by decree of the court, which I will discuss. At any time after the principal money has become due. This clause is common between section 60 and 67. So neither can the mortgagor pay in advance, nor can the mortgagee recover in advance. If due date of the payment is 3 years, both the mortgagor and mortgagee can only enforce their rights after 3 years are over. Mortgagor cannot insist on redeeming the mortgage before 3 years. He cannot say, I have the money, I have come here after 1 year, take the money, I want my documents back. He will have to wait for a period of 3 years because that is the date on which the mortgage money has become due. Now this, I have already talked of it. Right of redemption and right of foreclosure are coextensive. To redeem and the right of mortgagee to foreclose public sale are coextensive and accrue at the same point of time. Second slide, next slide. Next slide. Once one is exercised, the other will come to an end. The term exercised here would mean not merely filing a suit, but passing of decree and execution thereof. Next slide. This is a very lead judgment of the Supreme Court. It says right of redemption, which is embodied in section 60 of the Transfer of Property Act, is available to the mortgagor unless it has been extinguished by the act of parties. In India, it is only on execution of the conveyance and the registration of the transfer of the mortgagor's interest by registered instrument that the mortgagor's right of redemption will be extinguished. So even if there is a decree of foreclosure, even if there is a decree of sale, if the sale has in fact not taken place and the document not registered, the right of the mortgagor to redeem will not be extinguished. He can go on the last moment and offer the money and get the property back. The purchaser will not be entitled to take the property. The conferment of power to sale without intervention of the court in a mortgage deed by self will not deprive the mortgage offerer of his right of redemption. The extinction of the right of redemption has to be subsequent to the deed conferring such power. The right of redemption is not extinguished at the expiry of the period. The equity of redemption is not extinguished by mere contract of sale. So even an agreement for sale will not extinguish the right. This is a very interesting judgment which has arisen under the SARFAESI Act. And there are security interest rules, Rule 8 and 9, framed under the SARFAESI Act. These rules provide that a public advertisement has to be given before you auction the property. And also a notice to the borrower has to be given by the bank. Although the bank is entitled to sell the property on its own, a notice has to be given to the borrower at his last known address. This is the requirement of Rule 8. The question that came up before the Supreme Court was, is the Rule 8 mandatory or directory? And the Supreme Court held that it was mandatory because the requirement of 30 days notice was essential to enable the mortgagor to redeem the property by paying money. This opportunity he cannot be deprived of, even in a case where bank has a direct right to get the property sold. Next slide. Payment has to be made in the currency in which the debt is contracted. The tender has also to be unconditional and of the proper amount. To deliver to the mortgagor, this is self-evident. I have already discussed this, so we can proceed with the next slide. This is an important clause. It has not been extinguished by the act of parties or by decree of the court. Decree of the court is a decree of foreclosure or sale. The moment there is a decree of the court and it is enforced, the right will be extinguished. And decree which is enforced, the right will get extinguished. But what is act of parties? A mortgagor and mortgagee, after entering into the mortgage, subsequently enter into a sale deed whereby the mortgagor transfers the property to the mortgagee, there will be a merger of interest. Such a sale will not be invalid if executed after the mortgage. Now, section 60 talks of right of redemption. It starts with the words in absence of a contract to the contrary. Section 67, which gives a right to the mortgagee, starts with the words subject to a contract to the contrary. Sorry, 67 starts with the words in absence of a contract to the contrary. 60 doesn't start with such words. Therefore, while the right of foreclosure or sale can be circumscribed by contract, the right of redemption cannot be in any manner affected by any contract. That right of redemption is absolute, and any clause which affects the right of redemption would be bad. This is further fortified by the fact that it can only be extinguished by a subsequent act of parties or by a decree of the court. Therefore, any clause in the contract or any condition in the contract which results in deprivation of this right or circumscribes this right is a clog on redemption, and such a condition in the mortgage deed would be void. Next slide. In this judgment, a suit for redemption was contended to be premature on the ground that the period of redemption provided was 99 years. The Supreme Court held that such a long period of redemption is bad, as it was a clog on redemption, and observed, right of redemption recognized under the Transfer of Property Act is thus a statutory and a legal right, which cannot be extinguished by any agreement made at the time of mortgage as a part of mortgage transaction. It is also quoted Pomal Kanji as under. It is settled law in England and in India that a mortgage cannot be made altogether irredeemable or redemption made illusory. Here the redemption was made illusory. You could redeem, but you could redeem only after 99 years, not before that, making the redemption practically illusory. But I must point out that there is an earlier judgment of the Supreme Court in 1958, which has taken the view that an 85-year period of redemption is valid. So it all depends on the nature of the loan, the nature of the transaction, whether the condition of 58 years, suppose the loan itself was a long-term loan, then the long period may be a valid long period for redemption of mortgage. A recent judgment of the Supreme Court, which is delivered on 17th April 2020, reasserts this view, that is Shankar Shakharam Kenjale versus Narayan Krishna Gade. Now, these illustrations are very vital to appreciate what I mean by a clog on redemption. Each illustration is relevant. A condition converting a mortgage into sale or non-payment is invalid as a clog on redemption. AIR 58, Supreme Court 770. An agreement in the mortgage deed that on non-payment on the date fixed, the mortgagor is to sell the property to the mortgagee at a price fixed by an umpire, not price already determined, price to be fixed later, is also a clog on redemption. A decree of the court on compromise in a mortgage deed suit, that on failure to pay, the mortgagee was entitled to take possession, was also held to be a clog on redemption. A condition postponing redemption on non-payment on due date for a period of 12 years was held to be a clog on redemption. Therefore, otherwise the mortgage was to be, the loan was to be repaid in 3 years. But if you fail to repay in 3 years, it will have to be repaid only after 12 years, was held to be a clog on redemption. And such a condition void, he could repay the loan in 5 years and get the redemption of mortgage. A condition, this is a very vital clause, because a lot of banks and financial institutions are putting such conditions in the contract of mortgage, and such a condition is ex facie illegal. A condition restraining alienation by the mortgagor is a clog on redemption, as such a condition will deprive the purchaser the right of redemption. So any condition in the mortgage saying that you cannot sell your right of redemption, or you cannot create a new mortgage without our permission, is a clog on redemption. Long length of term of mortgage per se is not a clog on redemption. However, if the circumstances indicate length of term to be unreasonable or oppressive, redemption is allowed before that date. Now, who may sue for redemption? Undoubtedly, the mortgagor can sue for redemption. The second person who can sue for redemption is any person who has interest in or charge upon the property mortgaged, or upon the right to redeem the same. Who can these people be? They would include an alienee of the property. So after the mortgage, if I have created a mortgage of my bungalow, and after the mortgage, I have sold the mortgage property to somebody, that somebody would be entitled to redeem the mortgage. Similarly, a puny mortgage, I have created a second mortgage, he is entitled to redeem the mortgage. A co-mortgagor, suppose I and my colleague mortgagor we are two joint owners, and we have jointly mortgaged the property as a whole, then he can also redeem the mortgage and recover the money from me to become evident from remaining provisions. An assignee of the equity of redemption, a person holding a charge upon the property, any person who is having a charge on the property would also be entitled to redeem the mortgage. Any surety for payment. Suppose I have created a mortgage in favor of a bank of my bungalow, and some lawyer friend who is hearing me just now has stood as a surety for me. If he is kind enough to pay the bank, he will step into the shoes of the bank, and he would be also entitled to redeem the mortgage and step into the shoes of the bank against me as a mortgagee. Any creditor of the mortgage who has in a suit for administration of his estate obtained a decree for sale of mortgage property, but this is only a suit for administration of his estate. So it is of a deceased mortgagor, not of a mortgagor. Then only he can. Now it would be pertinent to highlight the last line. I am nobody. I just go and pay the bank the mortgage money. I will not be able to go back one slide. I will not be able to say that I am entitled to redeem the mortgage. I cannot go to the bank and say I want to redeem the mortgage. I am an outsider. Only the persons mentioned in section 91 can redeem the mortgage, nobody else. And this becomes relevant when we deal with the issue of subrogation. Now, this is a very important thing and which I would like to explain a little slowly. And I would like you all to see the table. This is a relationship between a mortgagor, mortgagee, and a puny mortgagee. The next table, please open the whole table. Now just see this. What is ownership? It's a bundle of rights. This bundle of rights are divided the moment mortgage is created. Mortgagor retains the right of redemption, while mortgagee gets the right of foreclosure or sale. So what does the mortgagor transfer? It transfers the right of foreclosure or sale to the mortgagee. This is how the transaction takes place. But after the transaction has taken place, mortgagor still retains the right of redemption. He can deal with the right of redemption. He can sell the right of redemption. He can further mortgage the right of redemption. When he further mortgages the right of redemption, the second table will come into being. What will happen? He will mortgage the right of redemption of the mortgagee to puny mortgagee 1, while he will retain with himself the right to redeem puny mortgagee 1. So what does puny mortgagee, what rights does the puny mortgagee has? He has two rights. One, he can redeem the prior mortgagee, the arrow, first arrow. He can redeem the first mortgagee and become the first mortgagee. And he can foreclose all the subsequent mortgages and the mortgagor. He can foreclose the mortgagor. So this is the right of the puny mortgagee. Now let us take a third mortgage is created by him. Puny mortgagee number 2. What happens? The puny mortgagee number 1 as a mortgagor has a right of redeeming puny mortgagee number 1. He transfers that right to the puny mortgagee number 2, as well as the right to foreclose him. And puny mortgagee number 2 would have a right to foreclose puny mortgagee number 1 and the first mortgagee, while he will have a right to foreclose the mortgagor. Therefore, it is said, redeem up, foreclose down. The mortgagor can redeem all the mortgages. The first mortgagee can foreclose all the mortgages. It will be redeem up, foreclose down. Then the right of subrogation. Subrogation means substitution. This right is primarily recognized by section 69 of the Contract Act. Kindly read that section. It's a part of quasi-contracts. A person who is interested in the payment of money, which another is bound by law to pay, and who therefore pays it, is entitled to be reimbursed by the other. Two things: he must be interested in the payment of money. There must be some interest in the payment of money of a person who is bound by law to pay. Then he is entitled to be reimbursed. The vital words are that the person entitled to reimbursement is a person who is interested in payment of money, which another is bound to pay by law. This is a personal right of subrogation and would indicate that it would have no application to a mere volunteer. So I just go and pay somebody's debt. I cannot be subrogated. I will not have a right to recover. Next. Now, right of subrogation is of two types. It can be by act of parties or by operation of law. How can it by act of parties? If by agreement it is stated that I have a right to subrogate, it will be by act of parties. First we will deal with by act of parties and then by operation of law. Next slide. This is covered by the third para of section 92. A person who has advanced to a mortgage or money with which the mortgage has been redeemed shall be subrogated to the rights of mortgagee whose mortgage has been redeemed. If, this is important, if the mortgagor has by a registered instrument agreed that such person shall be so subrogated. So there has to be an agreement and a registered agreement. There are two categories of such persons. Let us take it. A simple money creditor. I go and advance money to a person who has mortgaged the property and tell him that you take this money, redeem your mortgage. And a person who has an agreement with the mortgagor that the mortgage redeemed with the money will be kept alive for his benefit. In the first case, I will have no right of subrogation. In the second case, I will have a right of subrogation if the document is registered. Prior to 29, the document was not required to be registered. 1929, now it is required to be registered. The next slide is covered in this. By operation law is in the first paragraph of section 92. It says that every person who is entitled to redeem is entitled to be subrogated. So any person who is entitled to redeem the mortgage is entitled to be subrogated in place of the mortgage. What is subrogation? He becomes the mortgage. So if I am a person who is a surety is entitled to redeem. I as a surety redeem the mortgage of a bank. I will step into the shoes of the bank and be a mortgagee in place of the bank. I will only like to highlight one fact, that this is a statutory right conferred both under Transfer of Property Act and to a guarantor also under the Contract Act. Now, in light of insolvency and bankruptcy code, if there is a resolution plan, then in light of, I think, section 236, such a resolution plan, if approved by the NCLT, adjudicating authority, and by the subsequent higher courts, then the right of subrogation would be lost. This is held by the Supreme Court in Satish Gupta's judgment. Now, this is dealing with inter se rights of a mortgagor. This is slightly complex, and therefore I will be dealing with this topic through illustrations which I have prepared, and they will be available on the slide. But before I go to that slide, suppose there are two persons. I would like to explain this section in a simple language. I and my two brothers together are mortgaging a property. My share in the property is 50% and their respective shares are 25% each. When I mortgage the property, How are we required to contribute towards the discharge of debt? Debt is dealt with by Section 82, contribution. In that case, we will have to contribute in the ratio of 25%, 25%, 50%. Because if my value of the property is 50%, I'll have to contribute 50%. How would this contribution become relevant? Suppose I don't repay the loan and my brother repays the loan and redeems the mortgage. Then he would be entitled to sue me for the 50% of the amount which he has paid for the discharge of the debt. That is how contribution becomes a relevant provision. A suit between mortgagors may have to be filed in such a situation. Now I will read the section and then go over to the illustration. Where property is subject to a mortgage, belongs to two or more persons having distinct and separate rights of ownership therein. The different shares in or parts of such property owned by such person are in absence of a contract to the contrary liable to contribute rateably. Rateably means in the proportion in which they are owning to the debt secured to the mortgage. And for the purpose of determining the rate at which such share or part shall contribute, the value thereof shall be rateably would mean they will have to share the debt, shall be deemed to be its value at the date of the mortgage after deduction of the amount of any other mortgage or charge to which it may have been subject. Now we go to the illustration. If A owns land X valued at rupees 1 crore and B owns land Y valued at rupees 2 crores on the date of the mortgage, both of them approach a lender to borrow money and borrow 1.5 crores, mortgaging both the properties. What would each one have to contribute in discharge of the debt? Answer is given by the aforesaid section. B will have to contribute 1 crore while A will have to contribute 50 lakhs to discharge the debt and redeem the mortgage. For simplicity, interest is ignored in the illustration. In all illustrations, it is ignored. Suppose B redeems the mortgage. Now, suppose B redeems the mortgage. By paying the lender the full amount of 1.5 crores, he can sue to recover rupees 50 lakhs from A. The second paragraph of section 82, where two properties belonging to the same owner, one is mortgaged to secure one debt, and then both are mortgaged to secure another debt. And the former debt is paid out of the former property. Each property is in the absence of a contract to the contrary liable to contribute rateably to the later debt after deducting the amount of former debt from the value of the property out of which it has been paid. Now, if we go to the illustration, that will make it more clear. Where A owns two properties, land X valued at rupees 1 crore and land Y valued at rupees 2 crores on the date of the mortgage. A mortgages Y for 1 crore to B, and then mortgages both X and Y to C for 1.5 crores. Now what happens? First mortgage is of property Y which is valued at 2 crores for 1 crore. While the second mortgage is of property X and Y, together they now value 2 crores because 1 crore is the value of property X, 1 crore will be left value of property Y after having borrowed 1 crore, and they borrow 1.5 crores. If the debt of B is paid out of property Y, then in respect of debt of C, property X and Y, the property, will have to contribute equally because property Y will be considered of the value of rupees 1 crore instead of 2 crores. How this becomes relevant? How can property contribute? Person contributes. The answer is that the property can be sold by the mortgagor. And if both X and Y are sold to different persons, what will they contribute? That will be the issue which will arise. The issue would be very widely property and X are subsequently sold to different parties, and they are required to contribute or recover from each other. That would take me to inter se rights of a mortgagee. This is called marshalling, and it is covered under section 81. Now, what does this mean? In simple terms, if I have mortgaged two properties to one party and taken a loan, and thereafter mortgage one property to another party and again taken a loan, the second mortgagee can call upon the first mortgagee to recover from the other property and not from the property mortgaged to him first. Not that he cannot recover the full amount. He is entitled to recover the complete amount, but he can be told that he should first recover from the property which is not mortgaged a second time to the other person, the second mortgage. Because that property is mortgaged twice. You recover from the other property first. If you are unable to recover, certainly go to the second property. But this right is subject to a contract, and it is called marshalling of rights. We'll read the section and then the illustration. If the owner of two or more properties mortgages them to one person and then mortgages one or more of the properties to another person, the subsequent mortgagee, it should be mortgagee, is in absence of a contract to the contrary, entitled to have the prior mortgage debt satisfied out of the property or properties not mortgaged to him, so far as the same will extend, but not so as to prejudice the rights of the prior mortgage. So if he is not able to recover the full amount, he can certainly go to the other property or of any other person who has for consideration acquired any interest in any of the properties. This illustration is simple and will make the things very clear. If a mortgage is his two properties, X valued at 1 crore and Y valued at 2 crores, on the date of mortgage to B for a loan of 1 crore, and subsequently A mortgages Y to C for a further loan of 1 crore, C can insist that B should recover his dues from property X and then only recover from property Y, unless by contract he has waived such right. How this becomes relevant? Suppose the first loan was 1.25 crores instead of 1 crore. And if he recovers fully from property X and then 25 lakhs from property Y, the beneficiary will be the mortgagor and the second mortgagee will be the sufferer. He will not be able to recover anything. I'm just giving an illustration. Let me take it. The first property is valued, he recovers. I'm sorry, I should give a more correct illustration. I will correct my illustration. Instead of a loan of 1 crore, the loan is of 1.75 crores in the first case, and subsequent mortgage is of 1 crore, in which case if B recovers from X 1 crore and 75 lakhs from Y, C will not be able to recover anything. While on the other hand, if B recovers 1.75 crores from property Y, C will be able to recover his 1 crores property. I'm sorry. Again. C will not be able to recover anything if B recovers full 1.75 crores from property Y, because he will get only 25 lakhs left from property Y. While if C calls upon B to recover first from property X. He will have to recover 1 crore from property X, and property Y will be free for C. Or will be only for the extent of 75 lakhs will be recovered from C. Or can I give it again? I'm sorry because I have confused the illustration more than clarifying it. Let's take, going back to the illustration only.
Sir, if you want, I can edit the illustration accordingly.
No need to edit the illustration. Let me edit the illustration. Let me put this 1.75.
In the first
illustration.
Okay.
No, not here. That is all right. 1.75.
If A mortgages
is 1.75.
At 2 crore, it should be 1.75.
Valued at rupees 2 crores on the date of the mortgage for a loan of 1.75
Okay, sir.
crores. Then everything is fine.
Okay.
Now, supposing B recovers 1.75 crores from property Y, only 25 lakhs will be left for C to recover his 1 crores because property X is not mortgaged to him. So C can ask me that no, don't recover from property Y. Don't recover from property Y. Please recover from property X to the extent you can. If he recovers from property X 1 crore, he will be recovering only 75 lakhs from property Y, and C will be able to recover his 1 crore from property Y. If the reverse takes place, the beneficiary will be the mortgagor and not the subsequent mortgage. Therefore, the right of marshalling is a very important right of a mortgagee. He can tell the earlier mortgagee that please don't recover from the property which is mortgaged to me. Please recover from the property which is only mortgaged to you and not the one which is mortgaged to you and me. And if you are unable to recover from that, then only go to the property which is mortgaged to me. Undoubtedly, a prior mortgagee has a superior right than a subsequent mortgagee. But this is an essential requirement in case of a subsequent mortgagee to be able to tell the prior mortgagee if such a situation happens. Now, contribution is subject to marshalling. Now, we have seen that two properties or two persons can contribute in the ratio in which the value of the property is on the date of the mortgage. And in marshalling, the subsequent mortgagee can call upon the prior mortgagee to take it only from the mortgage which is not mortgaged to the second mortgagee. Now, these are the two conflicting rights. But between these two conflicting rights, marshalling, the right of the mortgagee, will prevail of the rights of two mortgagors. Therefore, nothing in this section applies to property liable under section 81 to a claim of subsequent mortgage. Nothing in contribution will apply to subsequent mortgage. Illustration of that. I'll go slowly on this illustration. It's a little complex illustration. A and B own two properties, X and Y, each of the value of rupees 1 crore. Each property is valued at rupees 1 crore. A mortgages X to C for a loan of 40 lakhs. And B mortgages Y to D for a loan of rupees 60 lakhs. Thereafter, they jointly mortgage both the properties to E for a loan of 50 lakhs. And subsequently, A mortgages X, the first property, to F for a loan of 70 lakhs. Now, how does this happen? How does it function? Now, as per the principle of contribution, A and B will have to contribute in the ratio of 6:4. Why 6:4? 1 crore is the value of the property. minus 40 lakhs will make it 60 lakhs. So 6, second value of the property is also 1 crore. Minus 60 lakhs is the loan taken by B from D. Therefore, it becomes 40 lakhs. Therefore, the ratio of 6 is to 4. For discharge of the mortgage of E of 50 lakhs will have to be contributed by A and B in the ratio of 2 is to 1. Therefore, 33 lakhs will have to be paid by A and 16 lakhs will have to be paid by B. But now there is a subsequent mortgage also. Of which property? Property X. So F can tell E that don't recover from both. Only recover from property X first and then recover from property Y. Because if you recover from both in this ratio, then I will be the sufferer, which I will not like to permit. So first recover in the ratio which is that you recover only from property Y, then recover from property X if you cannot recover the amount. Now he may be able to recover the amount from property Y at least to the extent of 40 lakhs of rupees. And if that happens, he may not be required to recover a major amount from property X, which F can recover. This is the last topic of the day, that is charge. There is a lot of confusion between a charge and a simple mortgage. Basically, charge is not a mortgage. There is no transfer of an interest in property. And a charge can be both by operation of law and by act of parties. And even by act of parties, it can be by a registered instrument or it can be oral. Let us read the definition of charge first. Where immobile property of one person is by act of parties or by operation of law made security for the payment of money to another, and the transaction does not amount to a mortgage. So 3 conditions. 1, it has to be of immobile property, by act of parties or by operation of law, made a security for payment of money to another. It is for the purpose of security, but it is still not a mortgage. So there is no transfer of an interest in immobile property in case of a charge. The latter person is said to have a charge on the property. Now this is very important. Provisions herein before contained which apply to a simple mortgage shall as far as may be applied to such charge. And now the last highlighted portion. No charge shall be enforced against any property in hands of a person to whom such property has been transferred. So if the property is transferred to somebody and that somebody has no notice of the charge, then he will get the priority and the charge will not affect his rights. This is very vital as far as charge is concerned. Then the next. Charge can be by act of parties or by operation of law. By act of parties, no particular form of words are necessary for creation of a charge, but there must be an intent in present today to give the immobile property as a security for satisfaction of a debt. There is no transfer of immobile property. And lastly, no registration required under the Transfer of Property Act, but if in writing, required to be registered under the Registration Act. By operation of law, suppose you are a vendor, you have sold the property, but you have to still receive some money. Then for unpaid amount of money, you have a charge over the property by operation of law. This charge is under section 55(4)(b) of the Transfer of Property Act. Similarly, a purchaser has paid in advance and the property is not transferred. The purchaser gets a charge in respect of the amounts paid in advance under 55(6)(b). Charge is also created by statutes such as Municipal Act Land Revenue Code, etc., which are all by operation of law. Now, what charge versus mortgage? This issue was dealt with by the Supreme Court in JK Bombay Private Limited versus Kesarahan Spinning and Weaving Mills Limited, AIR 70 Supreme Court 1041. These words are very vital to explain it. While in the case of a charge, there is no transfer of property or any interest in it, but only the creation of a right of payment out of a specified property. A mortgage effectuates a transfer of property or an interest. No particular form of words is necessary to create a charge. And all that is necessary is that must be a clear intention to make a property security for payment of money in presently. I have already explained it, but these are the words of the Supreme Court. As I have highlighted the last portion of the definition, notice of charge, the last portion of definition clearly provides that no charge shall be enforced against any property in hands of a person to whom such property has been transferred for consideration and without notice. This came up for consideration in Dattatreya Mote versus Anand Datar, 74-2 SEC. The issue was that there was a prior charge and a subsequent mortgage. On evidence, it was found that the subsequent mortgagee had no notice of the charge. Supreme Court held that the subsequent mortgagee has a priority over the prior charge. Thank you. That completes my whole chapter on mortgages.
I will just unmute everyone, sir, so if all the participants are permitted to.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bhai.
Thank you, sir.
So now I
Which
will
period
permit
the right of
Okay. Yes, Mr. Singhi is on.
up to which period the right can be exercised under the IBC proceedings by a mortgagor?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Sir, take a minute.
The IBC proceedings.
Yeah. Suppose a mortgagor has a right of redemption. When would that right of redemption come to an end in IBC proceedings?
Submitted, it will come to an end technically.
Sir, if you can just repeat that because you were, sir, sorry, you were just muted. If you can just repeat that, sorry. Sir, if you can just repeat the answer to Mr. Singhi's query.
My opinion is that only when a resolution plan is submitted, at that point of time, will the mortgagee's right of redemption come to an end. Because if the resolution plan is rejected, mortgagee's right of foreclosure or mortgagee's right of sale would continue. He can stand out of winding up or dissolution and enforce it.
Okay.
And it reports. What is your...
Sir, we are learning, sir.
No, you can answer it because I feel that if the resolution clause fails and 53 comes into play, he would have an option.
So, is there an accrued right when COC accepts the plan, or that only once it goes to the adjudicating authority that the right comes to an end?
Only when the adjudicating authority approves the plan, not till when the COC accepts the plan.
Can he enforce the right of redemption even without taking recourse of section 12A, capital A of IBC?
I believe that there is a judgment where the Supreme Court has taken a view on this issue.
I'm not aware. Not aware.
Well, you can, if somebody is willing to pay the full money even outside 12A, can he go or not? I'm not very sure.
Okay.
So the other participants who want to ask any question can unmute themselves. I will just.
ની અંદર કે જ્યારે બી મેલ ડ્રાફ્ટ કરતા હતા કોઈક મેસેજ આવ્યો હતો એવો કોઈ કે લાઈક
Sir, it seems there are no other participants who are listening.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Darshan,
Yes,
can I
Mr.
ask?
Patel. Yeah. Just I will take
Yes.
Mr. Thakur. Hello. મીરભાઈ તમને આવે છે આવાજ?
હા બધાનો અવાજ
હા,
આવે છે.
Mr. Patel wants to ask a question.
Sir, I want to know that કે મારા client છે ને parcels of land days of 2000. So that time I think there was a provision.
નથી સંભળાયું, પ્લીઝ રિપીટ.
Hello. Sir, આવે છે અવાજ?
હા.
હા સર, કેન આઈ આસ્ક કે આ અર્લિયર એવું હતું કે મોર્ગેજ રજિસ્ટર્ડ ના કરો તો પણ ચાલે એવું છે
2008 required to be registered.
હા 2008 રાઈટ. તો એ પ્રાયર ટુ ધેટ મારા ક્લાયન્ટે પાર્સલ્સ ઓફ લેન્ડ ખરીદી હતી. હવે એવું થાય છે કે એનું ઇન વ્યૂ ઓફ ધી સેલ ડીડ મ્યુટેશન એન્ટ્રી એ લોકો સર્ટિફાઈડ નથી કરતા. ક્લેમ ધી સેલર્સ who are the farmers agriculturists are taking objections કે તમે આને સર્ટિફાઈડ ના કરો કારણ કે અમારું મોર્ગેજ અનરજિસ્ટર્ડ ભલે ધો અનરજિસ્ટર્ડ છે બટ સ્ટીલ ઇઝ ઇન એક્ઝિસ્ટન્સ. તો હવે સાહેબ એટલી બધી અમાઉન્ટ છે ને એની કારણ કે there are 10 lakh hectares કે
1 minute. મોર્ગેજ અનરજિસ્ટર્ડ હોય
હા
એ એક જ સિચ્યુએશનમાં હોય provided the deposit of title deeds is effected.
ઓકે
When you buy a property, are you not checking the original title deeds?
maybe earlier advocates જે હશે because I am only
No
dealing with
title deeds. If you have not taken the title deeds, then the mortgage is existing. You have not verified it.
ઓકે ખાલી આરો રેવન્યુ રેકોર્ડ્સ જ ચેક કર્યા છે that time
હા,
એટલે
title deeds તો જોઈએ જ ને. If the title
જોઈએ.
deeds are handed over to a bank,
બીકોઝ ના સાહેબ એમાં પેલું શું કહેવાય સહકારી
there is no
મંડળીની
other
લોન
mortgage which is possible without registration.
deposition of title deeds.
Only mortgage is by deposit of title deeds.
Title deeds. But when there is a charge of cooperative society in that
That is not a mortgage. That's a statutory charge.
statutory charge. Okay. Okay.
That
So
charge
that-
will survive because it's a statutory charge.
So subsequent purchaser have to clear this charge.
Bear with it.
Okay. Okay. Sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Fine.
Ha, sir. Thank you, sir. Fine. Done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
I
Thank you, sir.
I will.
Thank you very much.
ઓફિસમાં બીજા જે બનાવ્યો તો પ્લીઝ કરો